My number one favorite romance of the year, and I fear it might be my favorite romance in all my years. Hello, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I will be sharing with you my top 10 favorite books of 2024. I read 152 books last year, and these are the top 10 that stood out. Instead of ranking them 1 through 10, I broke them into two categories. I have romance and fantasy, just because they feel like two different experiences when I read them. It was much easier for me to rank them in the categories than it would be for me to rank them all together. I actually don't have any thrillers on this list, which is a little bit surprising because in 2023, I read a ton of thrillers and I loved it. In between my romance books, I would read a thriller, but this year I got into my fantasy era. So instead of reading thrillers, I mostly read fantasy. First, I'm going to share my top 5 fantasy books and then I'll get into romance. Ranking my fantasy books from 1 through 5 was pretty difficult for me. Besides my top number 1 fantasy of 2024, the rest of them are pretty interchangeable. But for the purpose of the video, I will be numbering them. But starting with number 5 on my list, One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This is a duology. Two Twisted Crowns is book 2. I didn't love that one as much as this one, which is kind of controversial because in all the reviews that I've seen, everyone seemed to really like book 2 more than book 1. But I absolutely love this first book here. It was unlike any magic system I've ever read before. I believe this is described as like a dark gothic fantasy, and it was definitely giving those vibes. I'm not going to go into the synopsis of these books. I love to go into my books blind, and when I'm watching reviews and they start reading like the back of the books, I kind of skip forward because I don't want any spoilers. I don't want to know. I have the most fun going into a book completely blind and just kind of riding the wave with the story. So in number 5, we have One Dark Window. So in my number 4 spot, I have Carval by Stephanie Garber. I love this book so much that I jumped straight into book 2 and then straight into book 3. So I read the entire series within a week. I don't typically do that. I don't typically read entire series back to back like that, which is a goal though for 2025 to read the series like consecutively. But for this, I couldn't stop. I loved it so much. This is a special edition copy of this book. It comes in this hard sleeve, and then this is the actual book, which is so beautiful. I love it so much. I wasn't even going to read this series, but I wanted to read Once Upon a Broken Heart, and all the reviews that I've seen said to read this series first, and I'm so glad that I did. I don't regret it. I already read the first book of Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I liked it, but not more than the Carval series. So we'll have to see how I feel about the other 2 books in that series. But for the purposes of this list, Carval, number 4. Number 3 on my top 5 fantasies of 2024 is Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I was waiting a hot minute to read this book. I got the audio book and listened to it that way, and I loved it. I loved it. I think I finished this book in maybe 2 days, 2 or 3 days. Super quick considering how thick this book is. This book kind of reminded me of the Belladonna series though because of the character Death. The stories are not the same, but if you liked Belladonna, I feel like you would like Quicksilver. Number 2, Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I feel like this one might be controversial because at the time when I read this, I did see reviews saying that it was too similar to something else. I want to say Hunger Games, which I haven't read. So I think because I didn't read Hunger Games or anything else like this at the time, like I said, I just got into my fantasy era in 2024. So I didn't have a lot of experience in the books. But when I read this one, I couldn't stop. My cat is literally going crazy. I don't know if you can see him. But I love this. I loved it. I loved it so much. I read this one. I read the little novella in between, and then Reckless. Reckless I didn't love as much as this one. But the third book, Fearless, is coming out later this year, and I can't wait for that. I can't wait to see how the author wraps this series up. And finally, in my number one spot, Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli. This was super easy for me to name number one. I don't know why I feel like people won't agree with me on this, but everybody's reading experience and journey is different. I love this. I love this. I loved it. Okay. I ate it up. I absolutely went feral for this story. This is a YA as well, I believe. It ended on kind of, I just saw Rachel Gillig has a little quote on the back of here: dark, romantic, and brimming with forbidden magic. Oh, I love this. I freaking loved it. As soon as book two comes out, I forget when it is. It's in February. Oh my God. Literally, I think February 18th. As soon as it comes out, I'm reading it. I can't wait to see how the author wraps this up. I believe it's just going to be a duology. Loved it. Number one, easy for me to say this is my top favorite fantasy of the year. I'm going to go into romances next, but real quick, another reason I couldn't just put them 1 through 10, mixing the fantasy with romance, the romance books that I have are pretty secure. Like, I know these were my top favorite romances, hands down, but trying to rank Heartless Hunter with my top like 2 or 3 romances, I couldn't do it. I literally couldn't do it. They all deserve the spots that they have. Like, number one, I guess at the end of this video, I'll wrap up like my favorite 3 books of the year. But spoiler alert, if you haven't read this, if you take anything from this video, read this one. Moving on to romance, my top 5 romances for 2024 in my number 5 spots. Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I love Abby Jimenez. She's one of my favorite romance authors. She wrote Yours Truly, which is one of my very favorite books of all time in any genre. Top 5. If my house was on fire and I had to save 5 books, Yours Truly would be on it. So because of that, if she writes it, I'm absolutely going to read it. And I loved this book. Justin, is his name Justin? Yes, it's a big deal for me to remember character names because I already told you in my first video, I forget immediately everything about a book, characters, plot lines, everything. I only remember the vibes. But I remember Justin, okay, and how he made me feel. His love language is acts of service, which is top tier in my opinion. My husband's love language is acts of service. There's nothing better than a man whose love language is acts of service to me, in my opinion, and the way that he came through in this book. Please read this. Please read. I hope you have a notepad out and you're writing notes, okay? You need to read Heartless Hunter. Yes. You need to read Just for the Summer, Abby Jimenez. Put that on your list. Number 4, oh my lord. Number 4, Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. Stop. Just, I love this. This is book 2 in the Rose Hill series. Book 1 was amazing as well, but coming up with my top 5, I definitely like this one a little bit better than book 1. But girl, read book 1 too, okay? Read this series too. The third book is coming out this year and I will be reading that immediately. I love this series so much. Weston. That's all I have. That's all I have to say. Okay? Justin. Weston. Girl, you need to read that series. Number 3 is Keeping 13 by Chloe Walsh. I love Johnny and Shannon. I read Binding 13 and Keeping 13. I have not read the other books in the series yet, but they follow other characters. This is considered a young adult book. I'm not sure if I completely agree with that, honestly. There are some pretty heavy themes going on. There's some trauma that happens. This book broke my heart and put it back together again. It took me a while to pick up Keeping 13 after Binding 13 because Binding 13 was traumatizing. Like there was so much going on and it ended on such like a intense moment. I was afraid to pick this up to continue to see what happened after it, but I love this book. I can't wait to get into the other characters' stories. We are down to my top two favorite romances of 2024. Number two, This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. I don't even know what to say about this book, but I loved it. I read this series with my husband. The first one is called Before I Let Go, and then the second book is This Could Be Us, and then book 3 is coming out later this year. What can I say? Oh, look, Emily Henry has a quote on here. It says, heart-searing, sensual, and life-affirming. Just like I mentioned earlier with Justin from Just for the Summer, I rarely remember characters' names, but I remember Judah and Soledad, okay? I read this early in 2024, and I still think about these characters literally. When I see this book on myself, I just feel like all the feelings. I'm like, oh my God, I love this book so much. It made me feel everything. I highly recommend this series by Kennedy Ryan. Read Before I Let Go first and then jump into this one. Tia Williams has a quote here. It says, addictively delicious. S.A. Cosby has a quote on here too. Kennedy Ryan knows the secret corridor of the human heart better than nearly any other writer working today. He said what he said. Okay, my number one favorite romance of the year, and I fear it might be my favorite romance in all my years. Into the Dark. If you know, you know. If you read and love this series, you freaking know. I live, die, breathe Magnolia Park's series. Okay? This book was thick, but I never wanted it to end. Do you hear me? This is the best book ever, ever. Best series. I think I mentioned in my other video, My Roman Empire. Nothing will ever compare. I think once I finish the Binding 13 series, I might rate it pretty highly next to the Magnolia Parks series, but this will always be my number one. Magnolia and BJ, this is their last book. I cried so hard, like an embarrassingly ugly face, snot nose, dry heaving, couldn't breathe. Every feeling that you can feel, I felt when I read this book. I love this so much. I love the characters so much. They're like my best friends. If I think about this book hard enough, I will literally sit here and cry, which I'm not going to do. Please, please, please read the Magnolia Parks series. If you read the first book, Magnolia Parks, and you didn't care for it, keep reading. I've read this series twice already. The second go around, I love the series even more than the first time because I already knew the characters. So even when Magnolia was being a pain in the ass, I still loved her because I knew her story. Keep reading. Jump into the second book, Daisy Hates, and then when you get back to Magnolia and BJ, like you really start to know the characters and love them. Please read this. Please read this. Please read this. If you were not taking notes during this video, I'm going to recap real quick, okay? I'm not going to go through all of my books again, but the ones that I highly, 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 highly recommend. If you're going to take anything away from this video, I want you to read these specific books. Kennedy Ryan, This Could Be Us. You have to read Before I Let Go first. Heartless Hunter, Kristen Cicerelli. Read this, please. And then comment and let me know how you feel about it. The Rose Hill series. Read Wild Love and then Wild Eyes. Let me know what you think. Read this. Read it. Read it. Please read this. Abby Jimenez, Just for the Summer. Oh my God. Please read this. No words. Read the Magnolia Park series immediately. They have different covers though. I believe I got this one on Blackwell. I think like this is the UK version because they discontinued the original covers, but I do have those. I also have the shoe covers, which are like the republished books. I don't care what kind of version you get. Read the story, please. Those were my top 10 favorite books of 2024. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you took a book or two away from this video that you will be reading. Let me know if you've read any of these and what your favorite books are of 2024. I think I want to make another video with like my top recommendations, not just from 2024, but just in my reading, history in general. For anybody who wants to get into reading or is looking for recommendations, I'm going to do that soon. But that is everything for today's video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me again. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more videos from me, and hit the like button if you like this one. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.